Okay, dear viewers, welcome to episode 7 of my deep dive into Lamentations of the Flame Princess. Today we are going to be diving into encounters and combat. Um, you'll find that it's surprisingly simple at times, and but still provides a little bit of crunch that I think your players will appreciate. So, um, without further ado, for those of you who are not familiar with role playing games and are still learning, Lamentations of the Flame Princess begins by defining an encounter. It's any situation where the PCs meet other characters or creatures in uncertain circumstances, and the game book expressly states there's no limit to the options available for an encounter. That is very different from what you'll see in the contemporary games like 5th edition Pathfinder, where every action or possible action has some sort of rule associated with it. In old school gaming, the encounter resolution and the plans the players take to resolve the counter is really more about creativity and player agency. So while there are actions that can be taken that are outlined in Lamentations of the Flame Princess, those are outlined purely because they're the more common actions that would be taken. Um, don't limit yourself to what's on your character sheet, and certainly don't limit yourself to what's in the book. Um, in recent game, Lamentations of Elemental Evil, the players have successfully avoided a giant lizard creature by throwing dead bodies at it from these creatures that they had defeated just prior. Um, uh, Certainly not covered in the rules, right? But that's what they did, and that allowed them to avoid a potentially deadly encounter. So encounters typically start off with a surprise check. This is across the board in most games what happens. In Lamentations, you roll a d6 on a 1 and 2. In most normal situations, your player characters are surprised. If the character creature is well hidden, they will surprise on a 1 through 4. When someone is surprised, they lose a turn. A lot of this is going to be up to how the encounter plays out, the conversations the player and the referee are having about what everyone is doing. This is purposefully simple to keep it somewhat abstract to allow for all kinds of things to happen. What I do like though, the game book expressly states that a large party of adventurers with a light source and metal armor on stone floors will not surprise anyone. So tromping through dungeon, the creatures know you're coming, and I think that's I like that because that is a little bit more realistic and makes things a little bit more challenging for the players. Unlike fifth edition, again, for example, you can have someone be stealthing about in order to get surprise, and it just kind of creates a really bizarre, almost superhero heroic sort of situation. Um, Once the encounter occurs and surprise is resolved, you have an encounter distance 3d6 times 10 feet, unless there's some specific detail that would define what the encounter distance is, like fog in a forest. Underground, and encounter distance is limited by visibility and the light source. And then, of course, creatures that can see in the dark and have ranged abilities will attack from beyond an opponent's vision. So that's going to create some really interesting um, encounters for you that could really hype up tension. I certainly like to focus on what the light source is and where the darkness begins, because it does add tension to to the situation, and forces the players to really think about what they want to do. Otherwise, they could get themselves killed. So, okay, and then reactions. Most cases, an NPC's reaction will be obvious based on the circumstances of the encounter. However, when in doubt, you roll on a chart, and this is pretty standard across the board in most role-playing games. You have hostile, unfriendly, indifferent, talkative, and helpful. This chart can also be used to resolve social encounters when the players are trying to convince an NPC as to a course of action, and you're not sure with how the NPC is going to react. So it's really important to make sure your NPCs have like motivations and you know a little bit about them. They don't have to be, a full dossier for the blacksmith or the hunter that the party is trying to engage. In fact, in the last session in Lamentations of Elemental, that's exactly what the party tried to do and hire a hunter. And this particular individual that they approached, one, he's higher level than them. Two, he's got a history, and so he was already not inclined to help them, but I wanted to give him a chance, so I made a roll, and he ended up being unfriendly. So they weren't able to hire him. Okay, combat. This is what is going to be the main focus of this episode today, mainly because there's a lot of rules to combat. Always is. And you always begin with initiative. And Lamentations of the Flame Princess provides you with two ways to do it. You can do side initiative, which is what I prefer. The players roll a d6 just for the entire group, and then the bad guys roll a d6, and whoever's higher goes first. I think that it does allow for swings in combat, and it puts a lot of tension on that d6 because the players want to win. I like that, but some people prefer individual initiative, which is a little bit more crunchy when in comparison. Basically, each character rolls a d6, and the referee rolls a d6 for each type of enemy. And then the referee counts down from 6 with everyone acting on the particular segment that they rolled. This can take a little while. It adds time. I'm not a big fan of it for that reason. I like simple and abstract, and like I said, I also like anything that's going to add tension. And then, of course, if there's opposing if there's to break a tie, you will be looking at dexterity modifiers and whatnot, and with respect to individual initiative. So combat, what to do? All right, so there is a series of actions that are outlined in the book, but it is not an exhaustive list, and that's expressly stated in the book. Again, encounters can be whatever the players want. So if you're a referee, you're going to have to think on the fly on how to resolve some of this stuff when a player says, hey, I want to do this. Can I do it? That's OSR play, and that's fine. It creates interesting encounters. It can create tension. It can create cinematic events, and certainly allows the players to have as much agency as possible. So what Lamentations provides is just the basics. Okay, and then there's some other issues that might come up that the book suggests or encourages, I guess, a way to resolve them, and we'll cover those too. So, attack, it's pretty straightforward. You roll a d20, add any bonuses that are pertinent, and compare it to the opponent's AC. If it's melee, you got to be in melee range. If it's a ranged attack, you be within range and apply the appropriate modifiers. What I like in this game is that it provides a little bit of crunch for the players to get a little to act tactically. Fighters, dwarves, and elves get the ability to press the attack, and they can also fight defensively. So if they press, they get a +2 to hit, -4 AC penalty, and defensive fighter gets +2 AC with a -4 attack. So there's a risk-reward, cost-benefit analysis that needs to be taken into consideration. And look at that, a typo. Anyway, anyway. But I do like this. I think it does provide some options for the warriors to feel like they're being warriors. In fact, Dagus, our dwarf in the Lamentations of Elemental Evil, he started getting tactical in an effort to kind of keep himself alive and be the tank for the party. And it ended up being a really good tactic because it allowed the ranged guys enough time to aim and do some serious damage to the two creatures that they were facing. All right, you can cast a spell. We're not going to go into the details of magic just yet, but when casting a spell, the caster is completely open to attack. You have to have both hands free, but the classic wand or staff is fine. Elves just need one free hand because they're elves. Clerics have to have a holy symbol in one hand for the entire round. You cannot drop anything or move. So if you're an elf with a shield and a sword and you want to cast a spell, you're going to have to drop your shield first, and then the following round cast the spell. Okay, instantaneous and permanent spell effects take effect right away, while the remaining spells will take effect at the end of the round or beginning of the next round before initiative is rolled. If you take damage, your spell doesn't go off. However, you don't lose the spell. That's not indicated in the rules at all, so that's nice. Okay, I really like that Lamentations of the Flame Princess addresses this issue because this happens in every game I've ever played. Someone wants to drop a weapon and change their weapons and attack. Well, I mean, that takes some time, right? So I do think there should be some kind of weapon attack penalty or something. Now, and Lamentations provides that, and the weapon must be accessible. If it's not accessible, you'll be looking at uh, another set of rules about getting an item. But generally speaking, if you drop your bow to draw your sword from a scabbard, you can do that and still move and attacking, but with a -2. Hold action. Everyone likes doing these. It's another tactical option. Not much different from other games. Basically, you hold your action and it happens simultaneously with other actions taken when you finally do act. Okay, movement, 1/3 of normal movement rate in any given round, and you can still attack if there's an enemy within striking distance. I interpret this to include ranged weapons. You can charge, that moves your full rate, but you have a -2 AC penalty, but you can do double damage on a successful attack. And then, of course, set to receive charge. Some weapons, like the spear, can be set to receive a charge. They will strike first once the opponent, gets in range. But if they are successful in their attack, they will do double damage to the charging enemy. All right, parry. This is like essentially going full defensive. I don't really like it that it's called parry because to me parry is a maneuver that a fighter would do, but that's what it's called for this game. Basically, no other actions are allowed, and you basically get a +2 AC bonus if you're a cleric, halfling, magic user, or specialist. +4 AC bonus to fighters, dwarves, and elves. So they're a little bit better than your other character classes. Again, that goes to the sort of specialization aspect of each of the classes. I like that. What I also like is that it can be declared outside of initiative sequence, provided you haven't acted yet. So that allows you to rethink what you were planning on doing if circumstances change in the middle of combat. I do like that. I think that's a fair way of handling someone who may have lost an opportunity to attack something, grab something, do something. They can just simply say, okay, well, I'm just going to go defensive until next round. So I like that. I think that's a smart addition to this sort of game mechanic. All right, here we are. Use an item. If you have it in your hands, or it can easily be grabbed from your belt or around your neck, you can use it freely. There's no issue. If it's in a pouch, it'll take 1d3 plus 1 rounds to ready. So if you're looking for some garlic to avoid the vampire or something, or wolfbane against the werewolf, and it's in a pouch, well, it's going to take you a bit to get there. And if it's in your backpack, you're in big trouble. It's going to be 3d6 rounds to ready. And while you're rummaging around looking for whatever item you're trying to find, your target is if being attacked from behind, which we will cover eventually. So yeah, it's not a good idea to be rummaging around for stuff in combat. So here's some of the other combat issues that come up. Aiming. I like how this was included in the game. My players have been taking advantage of this, which is great, and it does add some interesting combat tactics issues, making combat more dynamic. Again, Dagus in the one combat in the last game session, they were being attacked by two bipedal creatures with morning stars. Dagus went full defensive while everyone else aimed. So that first round, he was the tank, and that kind of dynamics I think is great. So it takes a full round to aim. Can take no other action. You can't move. You can't do anything. During that time, you lose your Dex modifier to AC, but you get a +4 to hit the following round when you do use your ranged weapon. Attacking from behind, target must not be aware of the attack. This is going to be referee discretion, what makes sense. Certainly, a surprise attack would count. Depending on how the flow of combat is going, I might allow someone who has been, you know, away from melee enter into melee with that first attack being from behind, as the opponent is too busy focused on another. That's going to be referee discretion. You lose dexterity and shield modifiers, and the enemy receives a further +2 bonus to hit. So, attacking from behind certainly has its benefits, especially if you're a specialist and you're backstabbing. All right, so there's cover. It's pretty straightforward. I think it's a bit more punishing or challenging to attack someone from cover, especially if you got some 90% cover. They get a +10 to their AC. But again, it's allowing for those lucky shots that do make it through. But other than that, there's nothing new here. All right, firing into melee. Now, this comes up all the time in every game I've ever played, and it gets, as the game has progressed from 2nd edition to 3rd edition to 4th edition to 5th edition, it has gotten progressively dumber, in my opinion. James Raggi in Lamentations of the Flame Princess fixes it. You don't want to fire into melee combat because you don't get to choose who you hit. It's all randomly determined. So you're going to roll to hit, but then there's going to be a percentile roll to figure out who you hit and see if that number beats that AC. So you could easily hit one of your companions. If you aim, you increase the percentage of your chance to hit the opponent that you're looking for. So if your buddy fighter is hand to hand with some medium-sized creature, normally that would be a 50% chance to hit either one of them. However, if you take a full round aim, now that monster is considered 2. Okay, so now he has a 66% chance to hit that monster. Larger creatures would also increase this percentage. And when firing into melee, you don't get your dexterity modifier. So I think it's to sort of capture abstractly the back and forth and the maneuvering and the ducking and dodging and parrying and screaming that's going on in a melee. Firing into melee is not a good idea, but you can do it if you really want to. Helpless opponents. Automatic hit, max damage with a melee weapon. I think this is fine. It certainly takes away the concept that, if you cast sleep, you can't be slitting throats. I think I would house rule it that sleep could still slit throats. I haven't really decided that yet. I think I want to keep my campaign rules as written because in earlier editions of the game, sleep was like an incredibly powerful first level spell when used appropriately. It's one of my favorites, actually. So this is just max damage, no instant kill. Holy water. Interesting rules for this. So you could be sprinkling water on an opponent in melee combat, and you need to have one hand free, obviously. It takes a full round to do, but the armor class is always 12 because you're just trying to touch them. You're not trying to pierce any armor or anything like that, unless if shield is being used, and then that'll increase the AC. You can throw it, in which case you use the range modifiers of a rock, and there's a 75% chance it will break upon contact, and it does D8 damage against undead, summoned creatures, and innately magical beings such as elves. Yes, elves will be burned by holy water. I absolutely love this. In an actual play of this game, Lamentations of the Flame Princess, I watched, the referee actually house ruled that magic users are burned by holy water as well. I like that. I might use it. All right, invisibility and darkness. Okay, so I know I'm picking on 5th edition a lot in this video, but 5th edition really broke combat. It's dumb. So in Lamentations, you're gonna have a -6 penalty to hit if you can't see your opponent. All attacks against The players by unseen opponents are considered from behind, and missile attacks automatically miss. Fifth edition, for some reason, you can still hit people. It's ridiculous. Um, so what is recommended is to consider a random character's hit in the dark if the player is firing into like this occupied area, but generally it's going to be an automatic miss. I like the way Lamentations handles that. So, all right, morale. NPCs and monsters are not going to fight to the death. I mean, we did kind of cover morale in a earlier video for like how NPCs hired by players will act, but in combat, this is when you will be rolling for morale when the opponents encounter opposition and or are reduced to reduced strength, half strength, excuse me. There's some adjustments the referee can. It's up to the referee to, depending on the situation, to maybe give bonuses to the roll. But essentially, you roll 2d6 and compare to the monster, creature, NPC's morale. If it's equal to or lower, the creatures will continue to fight. Otherwise, they lose their nerve and may surrender or try to run. Mounted combat's really easy. When a mounted character is attacking someone on foot, they get a +1 to hit and +1 to AC. However, they have to be using a smaller minor weapon. And they have a -5 to hit when using missile weapons. So the implication here is that two mounted characters would be equal out. There would be no penalty or bonus or anything like that. But real simple. All right, oil and fire. This is great. This is the only way fire should be handled. In other iterations of the game, lamp oil is treated like napalm. It's not. Lamentations of the Flame Princess expressly states that. Basically, if the creature's hit, they suffer D4 damage. If they roll max, the victim has to make a saving throw versus breath weapon or suffer another D4 damage. If that damage is 4, another max damage, then the victim is engulfed in flames. And at that point, they'll be suffering D8 points of damage per round until dead or until they put it out. And during this time, there's a chance it can the engulfed target can start setting other things on fire. So the Lamentations gets oil and fire right in a way that I've not seen in any other iterations of this game. I also like how pursuit is handled, and it's dawned on me I've misinterpreted it during my actual play. One of the benefits of doing a deep dive like this, I'm picking up things that I've missed during the first couple read-throughs. So basically roll a d20, add movement rate divided by 10. So if it's a 120-foot movement rate, it'll be 1d20 plus 12. Whoever has the higher roll wins. So basically you catch up to them and you're able to do something. Otherwise, the pursuit, the person gets away, right? The creature, the target gets away. No mapping is allowed during this time as the players are moving at their max speed through the dungeon. The referee is free to sort of describe, you take a left, you go down the hall, and then you take a right, But other than that, there's no mapping because you're running. You're not paying attention to that. There's also indication and rules for how to I guess keep pursuing creatures from killing your players. Until they can drop food and coins. Intelligent creatures will make a morale check to see if they pick up treasure. Unintelligent creatures want the food. They'll have to make a morale check to stop and start eating. And of course, dropping flaming oil it will stop a pursuit. The pursuit rules here are really nice and simple, and they make a lot of sense. All right, so unarmed combat. This is going to take a couple slides. This sort of seems to be a thing with Dungeons and Dragons. Grappling is just complicated. I think the third edition of the game literally has a 1,000-word essay on how to do wrestling and grappling and all that. Fortunately for us, for Lamentations of the Flame Princess is a pretty simple system, but it does take a little bit to walk through. So, first thing, fists do 1d2 damage. When wrestling, you have to have both hands free. If your opponent hasn't attacked yet and is armed, can get an immediate attack as someone is about to wrestle them. I think that makes sense. Both parties involved in the wrestling have to roll a d20, add attack bonus and strength bonus, kind of like a normal attack. Any ties are resolved by dex modifier. And the winner decides if the loser is immobilized, disarmed, or if they will release the loser. So this will be happening every round the wrestling is happening. Immobilized opponents can take no other action other than attempting to escape. They can attack with natural or minor weapons like a small knife, which would be resolved with another wrestling roll. So, like, if they're not armed with a knife, they can still try to punch. Okay. Any character who's immobilized for 3 successive wrestling rolls is pinned and helpless. No escape possible. Basically, the wrestling's over. The guy's done. Um, if the winner of the wrestling round chooses disarmament, the defender must save versus paralyzation to keep the item. And then uh, attacks made against wrestling characters are resolved as if they were surprised. Multiple wrestling attempts against a single defender are resolved with a +1 for all attackers per attack beyond the first. So if you have a bunch of guys jumping on one, the rolls they'll get a bonus to their roll. And then the referee has the discretion to add a +1 per hit die of the creature if the physiology or special abilities of the creature would suggest it has an advantage of wrestling. I'm thinking like you're trying to wrestle a giant slime creature who's slippery, or maybe it's got a lot of tentacles, something like that. Uh, but other than that's wrestling. It's simple, but it still took 3 slides. That must be, like I said, I think this is a D&D thing. Grappling just as complicated. All right, so some final thoughts on how Lamentations of the Flame Princess handles encounters in combat. I think it's great. It's designed to be quick and facilitate theater of the mind, but can also be easily used with grid combat. I think it's realistic and brutal, which is good because Lamentations of the Flame Princess is not a combat game; it's an exploration game. Uh, Combat is just something that happens. Especially if you have bloodthirsty players. Yeah, wrestling and grappling is still complicated compared to the rest of combat, but it's not as bad as other editions of D&D. In fact, I think Lamentations gets wrestling right. I mean, this is really simple. Just and that's what all we need at a gaming table. We want to keep things moving, you know. Don't shoot into melee. Yeah, this is also the most realistic and best way of handling that kind of action. Um, Too often, especially in 5th edition, players are taking advantage of that grid combat style gaming and are just ganging up on creatures. And I just think that's ridiculous. So, so that's it. Encounters in combat. Love it. Quick, easy, brutal, and pretty straightforward. Gives players some a little enough crunch, in my opinion, to be tactical, but a lot of room to get creative. And so that's it. Thank you for watching. Hit like, subscribe, bell icon, blah, blah, blah. You know the drill. Lamentations of Elemental Evil, Episode 7, dropped a few days ago. I am going to be publishing a blog post tomorrow on emergent storytelling. I opted against death because there's really not much to say, but emergent storytelling seems to be an interesting topic right now for me, considering uh, what happened in episode 7 of my game. And so that'll be dropping tomorrow. So check that out. Links will be in description below. And until next time, dear viewers, take it easy.